Number 10. Amanda Eller. In 2019, hiker Amanda Eller survived for 17 days in a thick Hawaiian forest. Eller's harrowing story began with a 3-mile hike. She'd chosen a different path than usual and stopped to meditate and take a nap. The woman, a 35-year-old yoga instructor, hadn't taken her phone with her and could no longer find the way back to her car when she awoke. For over 2 weeks, Eller remained alive by eating berries and guava when she could find them. While trekking through the forest, she drank river water, but only when it was clear enough so that it wouldn't make her sick. Aside from basic concerns like food and shelter, Eller would also struggle with a broken tibia and horrific sunburn, which had become infected. She had to walk barefooted after her shoes were swept away in a flash flood. Eller finally reached a spot where the terrain didn't allow her to walk forward. There was little food in the area, and the woman feared she would die there. Thankfully, she was spotted by a search helicopter as she came out of a ravine and was airlifted out of the forest. Eller had lost 15 pounds and suffered several infections, as well as a broken foot, but doctors believed she would fully recover. Today's featured fan shoutout is Instagram follower Pooh Bear. To appear in our next video, send us your pic rocking the latest merch from theywillkillyou.com and send it in to us on Instagram today. Number 9. IOANA HOCIOTA. In February of 2012, IOANA HOCIOTA was attempting to become the youngest person to hike the Grand Canyon, end to end. When she was in her teens, HOCIOTA moved to the US from Romania and was introduced to the canyons by a man who would later become her husband. The couple got married in a ceremony that overlooked the valleys before the 24-year-old set off on her record-breaking attempt. HOCIOTA and her hiking partner were on different trails, roughly 20 yards apart, as they crossed the southern rim of the Owl Eyes Canyon. At that point, HOCIOTA was about 18 miles from accomplishing her goal. She was higher up when her partner suddenly heard small rocks falling from above. A loud thud followed. HOCIOTA's lifeless body was discovered on a rock ledge, to which she'd plummeted from 300 feet. While not much is known about the circumstances of the fall, it's believed that she'd slipped on a loose rock. Devastated by her passing, HOCIOTA's husband stated that he'd be completing the final length of her hike while carrying a lock of her hair. Number 8. CHESSETY KROEZE. In August of 2020, Dutch woman CHESSETY KROEZE lost her life while hiking during a holiday trip to Spain. At the time, the 27-year-old was accompanied by her boyfriend, Justin, and they were exploring a region in the Catalan province of Lleida. KROEZE, who was about to graduate as a medical practitioner, suffered a devastating fall. There's little information on what had preceded the accident, but the impact caused her fatal injuries. The couple was in an area without cell phone coverage, so Justin tried to get help. The woman was ultimately airlifted out of the region. In the incident's aftermath, hundreds of condolence messages were expressed on KROEZE's social media. Number 7. Jordan BRASHEARS. A day after he'd become separated from his hiking companions, the body of 29-year-old Jordan BRASHEARS was found in Boynton Canyon, Arizona. On October the 8th of 2020, BRASHEARS and 2 friends were exploring the ancient ruins in the canyon. The man, who was hiking barefoot at the time, reportedly disappeared after rounding a corner. His companions shouted his name and looked for him for about an hour before calling the emergency services. Rescuers carried the search into the night and resumed it the following morning. They eventually found BRASHEARS' body and determined that after his companions had lost sight of him, the man suffered a deadly fall. He was most likely attempting to climb a rock ledge when he slipped and plummeted over 100 feet. Number 6. Donald MACGILLIS. In October of 2020, 74-year-old Donald MACGILLIS was hiking through Maine's Katahdin Mountain alongside his nephew Paul. MACGILLIS, a former editor for the Berkshire Eagle and Boston Globe, knew the mountain well, but both men became disoriented in conditions of powerful winds and heavy fog. They called for help and were told to shelter in place for the night, as temperatures were rapidly dropping. Then, at around 3 a.m., Paul called rangers and told them that his uncle had suffered a 50-foot fall. MACGILLIS had sustained injuries to his chest and leg. The men, who'd begun to develop hypothermia, were advised on how to stay warm. The following day, the rescue effort was joined by a Black Hawk helicopter. At around 9:30, A ranger reached the hikers, and MACGILLIS was airlifted to a hospital after the fog cleared. Unfortunately, his wounds proved fatal. Paul was treated for exhaustion and hypothermia, but was set to recover. Number 5. Michael Saint Laurent. Experienced hiker Michael Saint Laurent spent 9 days stranded on a trail in North Vancouver, Canada. The 45-year-old had set off on the Grouse Mountain hike for what he expected to be an 8-hour round trip. Saint Laurent was delayed by bad weather and had to spend the night on the mountain. He'd brought a tarp and a dry change of clothes, which aided him in surviving the cold. The following day he became further disoriented, and after veering off the marked trail, he sprained his hip and his knee. Hypothermia had also started setting in. Saint Laurent remembered losing track of time by day 3 and believing he'd been lost for nearly a month. By the end of the first week, Saint Laurent was shaking uncontrollably, overcome by pain and plagued by vivid hallucinations as he wandered through the frigid woods. He had trouble distinguishing what was real, but did have the presence of mind to cover up with the tarp at night, which likely saved his life. Saint Laurent's feet were ravaged by frostbite, and he could feel his organs shutting down by the time he reached the helicopter landing area. It was there that he was found by an off-duty rescue volunteer and her boyfriend. They administered first aid and the man was eventually airlifted out of the forest. In the incident's aftermath, Saint Laurent claimed that the experience had taught him to always leave word with a friend, no matter how minor the hike would be. Number 4. Stephen Gastelum. In September of 2020, Stephen Gastelum and a friend were hiking along Devil's Cauldron on the Oregon coast. When they reached an area north of Manzanita, Gastelum climbed a tree located on the edge of a cliff to pose for a photo. The 43-year-old was sent plummeting into the ocean below after the branch he'd climbed on collapsed beneath his weight. Rescuers riding jet skis as well as a Coast Guard helicopter were part of the search effort. After he was found, Gastelum was pulled to shore and airlifted to Tillamook Regional Medical Center, where he was later pronounced dead. Number 3. Geraldine Largay. In 2013, Geraldine Largay and a companion took on a portion of the famous Appalachian Trail, a marked hiking route that stretches between Springer Mountain in Georgia and Maine's Mount Katahdin. The 66-year-old retired nurse and her friend Jane Lee had set off from West Virginia. They were meant to trek over 1,100 miles together, with Largay's husband meeting them along the way with supplies. Lee had to abandon the hike in late June due to a family emergency. Largay was firm in her resolve of finishing the trip on her own. Several weeks later, the woman was just 200 miles short of her destination in northern Maine. A photo of her, taken by a fellow hiker, would mark the last time that anyone saw Largay alive. On July the 22nd, she tried sending a text to her husband to say that she'd gotten lost, but due to poor cell phone coverage, the message didn't go through. A search was launched, but no trace of Largay was found. It would take 2 years before the woman's campsite and her body was discovered by a log-in surveyor. The woman had died zipped up in her sleeping bag inside her tent. She'd continued to write in her journal throughout her ordeal, up until mid-August 2013. With little hope for rescue and dwindling supplies in one of her final entries, Largay wrote that she hoped whoever found her body would notify her family. Today's topic was requested by Key of You and Me 12, Guerrilla Warfare, and Darren Chambers. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Cassandra Bravo. While out hiking on a trail on California's Mount Whitney, 34-year-old Cassandra Bravo fell 100 feet. The woman sustained severe injuries in the fall, which impaired her mobility. Still, she managed to pull herself into a log shelter. It offered her some protection from the wind chill, while only wearing leggings and a tank top. Bravo spent 2 nights in sub-zero temperatures. When rescuers found her, they were shocked that the mother of 2 was still alive. She was airlifted to Antelope Valley Hospital in Lancaster. Unfortunately, her injuries and the cold exposure had taken a heavy toll on Bravo. She passed away in the hospital. Number 1. Michael Knapinski. In November of 2020, Seattle man Michael Knapinski and a friend were on a snowy hike through Mount Rainier. The 45-year-old and his partner then became separated. Knapinski chose to snowshoe down a slope towards Paradise, while his friend continued on skis. The alarm was raised with emergency services after Knapinski failed to arrive at their rendezvous point later that evening. The man had been caught in whiteout conditions and a rescue helicopter found him the following day. Knapinski was unconscious when he was airlifted to Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. As doctors started treating him, he went into cardiac arrest. Experts then bypassed his heart and lungs to connect him to an extracorporeal membrane oxygenation machine, or ECMO, one of the most advanced forms of life support in the world. In simple terms, it involves pumping blood outside of the body into a machine that takes out carbon dioxide and pumps oxygen-rich blood back into the body. The technique essentially brought Knapinski back from the dead after his heart had stopped for over 45 minutes. Knapinski didn't remember much about the incident and, judging from the scrapes and bruises on his body, assumed he'd fallen during the whiteout. After his recovery from clinical death, Knapinski claimed he'd be devoting his life to helping others. Thanks for watching. Would you rather hike through a tiger's territory or swim across a crocodile-infested river? Let us know in the comments section below.